The tragedy of Sylvester Stallone is not that he created Rocky Balboa. The tragedy is that he created an immortal character, then spent 50 years locking himself inside that character, until the whole world forgot that inside that man was a body that knew how to hurt. We remember the silhouette in the gray hoodie running up the 72 steps of the Philadelphia Museum at dawn while Bill Conti's trumpet splits the sky, the hands wrapped in tape-pounding sides of frozen beef, hanging in a cold warehouse until blood seeps through the cloth, the man swallowing 5 raw eggs at 4 in the morning, then stepping out onto empty streets to start running while the whole city still sleeps, the cry of "Yo!" Adrian, breaking from the throat of a loser who had just proved that remaining upright until the final bell was already victory, Rocky Balboa looking up at Apollo Creed after 15 bloody rounds with a swollen face and eyes that could barely open yet still standing. We remember John Rambo alone in the jungle with an M60 and a red bandana across his forehead, Barney Ross gathering every action legend of the 1980s for one last fight, old Rocky wearing an apron in a small Italian restaurant named after Adrian telling stories to the customers, then stepping into the ring one final time at 60 and making the whole world cry when he tells his son, "It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward." 8 Rocky films, 5 Rambo films, 4 Expendables films, 3 Creed films, 3 Oscar nominations. Box office champion across 6 consecutive decades, a record in the entire history of cinema shared only with Harrison Ford. But we rarely stop to think about the price. Behind every punch on screen, behind every time Rocky got up when he should have stayed down, there existed a body paying for every glorious moment. The metal plate implanted in his neck after a fracture on set. 8 spinal surgeries that his daughter summed up in one heartbreaking sentence. "Throughout my childhood, Dad was always in pain. A heart that nearly stopped when Dolph Lundgren punched him in the chest exactly as he had requested. His son Sage dead at 36. His son Sergo autistic and living a life of silence, the wife of 25 years filing for divorce then coming back, and Hollywood awarding him Worst Actor of the Decade before Hollywood itself later awarded him the Kennedy Center honor. The films never told the whole story. They never fully told how a man lived inside his own fictional character for half a century and could not find a way out. Before we follow the boy with the half-paralyzed face from Hell's Kitchen to the top of the Philadelphia steps, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like for Sylvester Stallone. To understand why that man never stopped, we must go back to where everything began. A charity hospital in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan, where from the very first moment he entered the world, Sylvester Gardenzio Stallone was marked by the world with a wound that would follow him for 80 years. On July 6, 1946, at a hospital for the poor in the toughest neighborhood in Manhattan, when the doctor used forceps to pull the baby from his mother's womb, the forceps slipped and severed the facial nerve, causing permanent paralysis of the lower left half of his face, making the lower lip droop, the chin slightly rigid, and the voice distorted into the slurred sound that 30 years later would become the trademark of one of the greatest stars in film history. But in 1946 was only a reason for every other child on West 49th and West 50th to mock, imitate, and isolate the boy no one wanted to play with. The boy could not speak clearly. The boy did not look like anyone else. And a city where appearance and voice decided whether you were listened to. The boy from Hell's Kitchen had neither. His father, Frank Stallone Sr., was born into an Italian family from Gioia del Colle in the province of Bari in southern Italy, a man who immigrated to America and made his living as a hairdresser, hands more accustomed to scissors than to a child, and whose presence in the family was more like a flickering light bulb than a steady source of light. His mother, Jacqueline Frances LaBeaufiche, later famous as Jackie Kung Stallone and born in 1921, carried half French blood from Brittany and half German with Jewish-Ukrainian roots on her mother's side. A woman so tough that she later became a well-known American television astrologer, invented rumpology, reading fortunes from the shape of a person's backside, and promoted women's wrestling on the Glow network in her 70s, then appeared on Britain's Celebrity Big Brother in 2005 at age 83, before dying on September 21, 2020, in Los Angeles at 98. But that toughness could not save the marriage. Frank's senior and Jackie divorced in 1957 when Sylvester was only 11 and his younger brother, Frank Stallone Jr., born July 30, 1950, was only 7. The family did not shatter in a single explosion. There was no night the father walked out amid tears, no single moment into which all the pain could be packed. But through slow erosion, the kind a child does not notice is happening, until looking back and seeing the family as scattered fragments on the floor with no one remembering exactly when the vase fell. After the divorce, Sylvester lived with his mother in Philadelphia for a time, then moved to live with his father in Washington, D.C., then back again with his mother. A child passed back and forth between the two ends of a dead marriage, belonging to neither. Then school, which should have been an escape, became another kind of prison. Stallone was expelled from more than a dozen schools: Lincoln High School in Philadelphia, Notre Dame Academy, Charlotte Hall Military Academy in Maryland, Devereaux Manor High School in Berwyn, Pennsylvania. The boy with the paralyzed face and slurred speech could find no place in any system designed for normal children. At Devereaux, a boarding school for children with behavioral and emotional problems, the list of classmates consisted of kids society had already filed under no future. The gym teacher at Devereaux, Paul Zizak, was the first to encourage Stallone to take up bodybuilding, and for the first time in his life, the boy mocked for his voice found something his body could do better than words. And there is a detail Jackie Stallone recounted years later. She said she had no hope for this boy. It was not that she did not love him. She looked at the paralyzed face, at the chain of schools that accepted him and then expelled him, at the teenager no school could keep for more than 2 years, and she could find no evidence that this child's life would be different from the other kids at Devereaux. In 1964, at age 18, Stallone enrolled at the American College of Switzerland in Leiden, Canton of Vaud, where he first encountered stage and acting as a profession rather than a pipe dream, before transferring to the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida, where he studied drama and earned a bachelor's degree in fine arts. At Miami, instructor Irene Cowan saw what Jackie had not. She gave him the lead in a class play and said he had something no acting school could teach. But late 1960s, America was not short of handsome young actors with perfect voices. Paul Newman, Robert Redford, Warren Beatty were dominating Hollywood, and Stallone, with his paralyzed face and a voice no casting director wanted to hear for more than 30 seconds, was on no one's list. In 1969, at age 23, he arrived in New York with a college degree in hand and a paralyzed face, and the city taught him his first lesson. New York in 1969, a 23-year-old with a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of Miami, half his face paralyzed, a certain voice, and less than $50 in his pocket. No money, no connections. Stallone went from casting call to casting call, sitting for hours in waiting rooms, packed with handsome young actors with white teeth and perfect diction, only to be cut in the first round because of the drooping lip and a voice no director knew how to cast. And for 3 consecutive weeks, the man who 7 years later would write an Oscar-winning screenplay slept on plastic chairs at the Port Authority bus terminal in Midtown Manhattan, the same terminal where the homeless, prostitutes, and runaway kids crowded together in the smell of urine and fluorescent light all night. Not one bad night. 3 weeks, 21 nights. The creator of Rocky Balboa once had nowhere to sleep. Then came the party at Kitty and Studs. In 1970, when desperation reached the point where self-respect was no longer a luxury he could afford, Stallone took a role in a softcore adult film, the kind of movie no actor puts on a resume and no audience remembers anyone's name from the screen. He was paid $200 for 2 days of shooting, not a career choice. An act of survival by a man standing between $200 and nothing, and choosing $200 because nothing feeds no one. Years later, when Stallone was already a superstar and the film was re-released under the title The Italian Stallion to cash in on Rocky's fame, a reporter asked him about it, expecting shame, evasion, the denial any star would choose when a dirty past is dug up. Stallone did not dodge. He said straight out, "That was me at rock bottom, and I'm not ashamed of having survived." That bluntness, that refusal to hide the scars, would later become the pattern throughout his life. The gold-plated cane at the Kennedy Center, 55 years later, was the same attitude. The same man refusing to pretend the wound did not exist. After Kitty and Studs, Stallone clung to New York by any means, cleaning rooms in a flophouse, packing fish at a food store, working as an usher at a movie theater, any job that paid enough for him to keep going to castings by day. Gradually, the small roles began to come, not leads, not names on posters, but the kind of parts audiences forget by the time they leave the theater. A bit part in Woody Allen's Bananas, 1971, whose name does not even appear in the credits. A minor role in The Prisoner of Second Avenue, 1975. And the most important role of this period, Stanley Rosiello in The Lords of Flatbush, 1974, an independent film about a 1950s Brooklyn youth gang, where Stallone first showed he could act, really act, not just stand there. And critics began to notice the strange name with the strange voice, though none of them considered him a potential star. He also began writing scripts, not because he discovered a passion for writing, but because he recognized a brutal truth. If no one would give him the roles he wanted, he would have to write the roles for himself. That was not creativity. It was the survival strategy of a man rejected by every door who decided to build his own. He wrote scripts nonstop, one after another, sent them out, got rejected, wrote more, sent them again, got rejected again for years, in apartments that sometimes did not even have enough electricity to turn on a desk lamp. Then one night in March 1975, Stallone sat in front of the TV and watched the boxing match between Muhammad Ali and Chuck Wepner, the Bayonne Bleeder, an unknown fighter from New Jersey given less than a 1% chance. Against Ali, a man beaten for 15 rounds who refused to go down until the final second, and Stallone saw in the bloody challenger on the screen the image of himself, a loser no one believed in, standing firm against adversity, not because he could win, but because he refused to lose the way the world wanted him to lose. 3 days. Stallone wrote the Rocky screenplay in about 3 continuous days, from the night in March 1975 when the image of Chuck Wepner, bloodied but still standing against Muhammad Ali, still burned in his mind, until the last page left the typewriter in the cramped apartment where sometimes the electricity bill hadn't even been paid. He wrote about himself, the boy with the paralyzed face that no one believed in, the man who slept in the bus terminal that no one saw, the actor who went to hundreds of castings that no one chose, then put it all into the body of an unknown boxer named Rocky Balboa from the Philadelphia slums, a debt collector for small-time mafia by day and punching a heavy bag in a filthy gym by night, a man the whole world considered a piece of meat, but who contained inside something no autopsy could find. The absolute refusal to accept that he was not worth more than what life had given him. The screenplay was finished. Stallone sent it out through his Gene Kirkwood, and the impossible happened. The studios wanted to buy it. Irwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff, 2 producers who already had names in Hollywood, read the screenplay and saw a movie in it. United Artists was interested. The figure offered $350,000. In 1975, that was enough money to buy a house, to wipe out every debt, to pull a man from the sidewalk into the middle class in one night. There was only one condition: Stallone would not play the lead. The studios wanted Robert Redford, or Ryan O'Neal, or Burt Reynolds, or James Caan. Anyone with a face the camera loved and a voice the audience knew. Anyone except the unknown guy with the drooping lip and the slurred speech, sitting in front of them in the cheapest suit in the conference room. Stallone refused. The man who had slept 3 weeks in the Port Authority bus terminal, who had done an adult film for $200, who didn't have enough money to buy food for Butkus, the bull mastiff he loved so much that he later put it in Rocky, looked at the $350,000 figure and said no, not because he was reckless, not because he calculated that starring would make more money, but because he believed, with the kind of belief that reason cannot explain and account books cannot record, that Rocky Balboa was him and he was Rocky Balboa, and to let anyone else put on the gray hoodie and run up the Philadelphia steps in his place would be a betrayal of the very story he had just written in blood. This was not a business decision. This was an act of pure faith, the kind of faith only people who have hit rock bottom possess, because when you have lost everything, the only thing no one can take is the belief that you know who you are. The price dropped, $350,000 down to much lower. In the end, Winkler and Chartoff agreed to let Stallone star with a budget of only about $1 million, an extremely modest figure even by 1975 standards, and 28 days of shooting. Director John G. Avildsen, who would later win the Oscar for this film, had to shoot with natural light because there wasn't enough money to rent lights for many scenes. Had to use the prototype Steadicam that Garrett Brown had just invented to shoot the scene of Rocky running up the steps, because there wasn't enough budget for a dolly track, and had to persuade Stallone to actually punch sides of beef in the cold storage warehouse because there was no money for special effects. Stallone agreed immediately, because for him, punching for real was not a sacrifice, it was the obvious thing. The film opened on December 3, 1976, and the world exploded. Rocky made more than $225 million worldwide on a $1 million budget, becoming the highest-grossing film of 1976 in America. On the night of March 28, 1977, at the 49th Academy Awards at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles, Rocky received 10 nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director for Avildsen, Best Actor for Stallone, and Best Original Screenplay for Stallone, and won 3 Oscars, among them Best Picture. To understand the weight of that victory, look at the films Rocky beat that night. Taxi Driver by Martin Scorsese with Robert De Niro, All the President's Men by Alan Jay, Pakula with Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, the very Robert Redford the studios wanted to replace Stallone with, Network by Sidney Lumet with Faye Dunaway and Peter Finch, and Bound for Glory by Hal Ashby. Rocky, the $1 million film written in 3 days by an unknown, won the biggest prize against 4 Hollywood masterpieces. The fictional underdog story on screen became the real underdog story off-screen, and the 2 stories merged into one, never to be separated again. Stallone became the 3rd person in Oscar history, after Charlie Chaplin with The Great Dictator in 1940 and Orson Welles with Citizen Kane in 1941, to be nominated simultaneously for Best Actor and Best Original Screenplay for the same film. The boy expelled from more than a dozen schools, the man who slept in the bus terminal, the actor whose mother said, "I have no hope for this kid," now stood on the Oscar stage, his half-paralyzed face projected on the giant screen before hundreds of millions of viewers worldwide. But right in that most glorious moment, the trap had already begun to close, silently, slowly, no one noticing until it was too late. From Oscar night onward, Hollywood knew Stallone was Rocky. Audiences knew Stallone was Rocky. And Stallone, whether consciously or not, began to believe he was Rocky. The boundary between the creator of the character and the character created began to blur, bit by bit, with every subsequent film. He tried to step outside the image. FIST. In 1978, the film about a union leader inspired by Jimmy Hoffa. A commercial failure, $20 million gross on a similar budget. Paradise Alley the same year, the film he wrote, directed and starred in about 3 Riesling brothers in 1940's Hell's Kitchen. Another failure. The message from the box office was clear to the point of cruelty, and it needed no translation. We only want Rocky, don't try to become anyone else. Don't try to prove you're a versatile actor or a writer with depth. Put on the gray hoodie, wrap your hands, run up the steps, and punch. Rocky saved Stallone from obscurity, but in return, Rocky locked Stallone into a single image for the rest of his life. The creator of the character became the prisoner of the character. And that sentence, whether Stallone knew it or not on Oscar night in 1977, was a life sentence without parole. Rocky won Best Picture. Stallone won everything. But from that night on, he was never allowed to lose, because Rocky doesn't lose, and the world now demanded that Stallone live exactly like the character he created, every day, every film, every time he stepped onto the red carpet, until his body could no longer take it. From 1979 to 1985, Sylvester Stallone not only dominated the box office, he invaded popular culture with 2 characters that later became 2 sides of the same coin. Rocky II opened in 1979 with $200 million worldwide, Rocky III in 1982 with $270 million, and Mr. T as Clubber Lang becoming an 80s icon. Rocky IV in 1985 with $300 million, and Dolph Lundgren's Ivan Drago becoming a metaphor for the entire Cold War packed into 12 rounds, each installment bigger than the last, each pushing Rocky further from the debt collector in Philadelphia and closer to the superhero icon that Reagan-era America craved. And parallel to Rocky, in 1982, Stallone gave birth to the second character, John Rambo in First Blood, the Vietnam veteran discarded by his country, the man with the red headband and the M60 in his hands, whose wartime pain turned him into a killing machine. Rocky was hope, the loser who gets up. Rambo was pain, the winner abandoned. Stallone now owned both sides of the entire American soul, and Rambo, First Blood Part 2 in 1985 made $300 million, turning him and Arnold Schwarzenegger into the two undethronable action kings for an entire decade. Their rivalry lasted nearly 10 years, from around 1985 when Commando and Rambo II opened the same year until the mid-1990s when both began losing box office. 10 years in which both tried to outdo each other with more explosions, bigger weapons, bigger muscles, more bodies. Schwarzenegger later admitted in a 2024 TMZ interview that Stallone was very useful to his career because he had something to chase, and Stallone replied that finally there was something to push him. If the two walked into the same party, they would stare at each other and think, "I've got to take this guy down." But every time Stallone tried to step out of the Rocky Rambo shadow, the market knocked him down immediately. Rhinestone in 1984, the comedy with Dolly Parton in which he played a country singer, was such a disaster it became the industry joke, and worse. He had turned down the lead in Romancing the Stone to do Rhinestone, a decision he called one of the biggest mistakes of his life when Romancing the Stone became a hit and launched Michael Douglas's peak career. Then the 1990s arrived, and the desert opened. Rocky in 1990, the worst of the series, $120 million on a $42 million budget, universally rejected by fans and critics. Oscar in 1991, the period comedy in which Stallone tried to prove he could do comedy, a complete failure. Stop! Or My Mom Will Shoot in 1992, in which he co-starred with Estelle Getty in a script that Schwarzenegger himself later admitted he had deliberately praised so Stallone would take the role, knowing the film would destroy his rival, and it did destroy him, becoming the eternal symbol of a Hollywood dud. Then came the Razzies, the Golden Raspberry Awards, given for the worst films and performances each year. Stallone won the Razzie for Worst Actor in 1985 for Rhinestone, in 1986 for both Rambo, First Blood Part 2 and Rocky IV at once, in 1989 for Rambo III, in 1993 for Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot, and The Peak. At the 1990 Razzie ceremony, Hollywood awarded him Worst Actor of the Decade, Worst Actor of the 1980s. The man once nominated for Best Actor and Best Original Screenplay on the same night, the third in history after Charlie Chaplin and Orson Welles to do so, was now given by Hollywood itself the award for Worst Actor of 10 years. This is not a humorous detail for talk shows. This is 15 years of open, continuous, systematic contempt. From 1990 to the mid-2000s, Stallone made one failure after another. Judge Dredd in 1995, Daylight in 1996, Get Carter in 2000, Driven in 2001, Detox and Avenging Angelo in 2002, the longest string of bad films any action star ever survived. And the key word here is survived, because Stallone did not disappear. He did not retire. He did not open a restaurant or write a memoir and withdraw in silence like so many other faded stars. He kept making films, kept being mocked, kept hearing critics say he was finished, and kept coming back. In 2006, at age 60, when everyone said he was crazy, when no one wanted to see an old, creaky Rocky step into the ring again, Stallone wrote, directed and starred in Rocky Balboa, the sixth installment, 16 years after the Rocky V disaster. Result, $156 million worldwide, the most positive reviews since the first film, and audiences around the world cried when Rocky, 60, widowed, lonely, regarded by everyone as a joke, looked into his son's eyes and said the line that Stallone was actually saying to himself after 15 years of non-stop punches from Hollywood. It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Stallone wrote that dialogue for Rocky, but it was Stallone talking to Stallone, the Razzie man speaking to the Oscar man, and both were one. In 2010, he came back again, The Expendables, the film gathering every 80s action legend that he wrote, directed, and starred in, making $274 million and spawning 3 sequels. But the price of The Expendables, broken neck, dislocated shoulder, metal plates implanted in his body, would follow him for the rest of his life, and that story belongs to the next part. Then came Creed. In 2015, young director Ryan Coogler brought Rocky back, not as a fighter but as a trainer for Adonis Johnson Creed, the son of Apollo Creed, played by Michael B. Jordan. And Stallone, at the age of 69, delivered a performance that all of Hollywood had to look up to. An aging Rocky, stricken with cancer, lonely, refusing treatment because he no longer had anyone to live for, then finding a reason to exist again in the young man who carried the blood of the friend who had died in his arms 30 years earlier. On the evening of January 10, 2016, at the 73rd Golden Globe Awards at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, Stallone walked onto the stage to accept the Best Supporting Actor award, the first Golden Globe of his life, 39 years after his first nomination for Rocky in 1977. He cried, and he said a line that anyone who understood the story up to that point could hear as two layers of meaning stacked on top of each other. "I want to thank my imaginary friend, Rocky Balboa, for being the best friend I ever had." He thanked a fictional character, the character he had created 40 years earlier in a rundown boarding room. He thanked that character as if thanking a real person, because for Stallone, Rocky was a real person, the friend who had saved him from obscurity, who had given him a reason to get back up every time he fell, who had lived inside him for 4 decades, until the boundary between the two men disappeared completely. This was the most beautiful moment in Stallone's career, and also the most unsettling, because when a man calls a fictional character the best friend he ever had, the question is not whether he is crazy, but how much of the real man that character had taken over, and how much of Sylvester Stallone remained without Rocky. A few weeks later, he received his 3rd Oscar nomination, Best Supporting Actor for Creed, 39 years after his first 2 nominations for Rocky, the longest gap between nominations in the history of the awards. The man who had been handed the Razzie for Worst Actor of the Decade now stood alongside Oscar contenders at nearly 70. The rhythm of rise, fall, repeated throughout 50 years, Rocky wins the Oscar. Stallone loses with FIST, Rocky 2-3 explode, Rhinestone collapses, Rambo dominates. The Razzies bury him, 15 years of desert, Rocky Balboa rises again, The Expendables breaks his neck, Creed cries on the Golden Globe stage, each fall deeper than the last, each rise slower than the last, but every time he stood back up. And every time he stood back up through Rocky or Rambo, through the characters, never through himself. The characters were the life raft, but a life raft is also a chain when you are never allowed to let it go. There is a list that no one compiled for Sylvester Stallone, but that his body has been recording for 50 years, not in ink but in broken bones, worn cartilage, dead nerves, and a metal plate implanted under the skin. That list begins in the summer of 1985, on the set of Rocky IV in Vancouver, when Stallone made a request that only someone who could no longer distinguish himself from the character would make. He asked Dolph Lundgren to punch him for real, not fake, not special effects, a real punch to the chest, with full force. Lundgren, 6 feet 5 inches tall, 240 pounds, European karate champion, 4th-degree black belt, did exactly as asked. The punch landed on his chest. Stallone felt nothing at the time. Then night came. His heart began to swell, a phenomenon that occurs when the heart muscle slams into the rib cage with enough force, the kind of injury doctors say is usually seen only in victims of head-on car accidents. His blood pressure spiked to 260. He recounted in the 2023 documentary Sly. "Dolph Lundgren, he pulverized me. Later that night, my heart started to swell, and then my blood pressure went up to 260. And they thought I was going to be talking to angels. An emergency flight flew low from Vancouver to California. Low because cabin pressure at higher altitudes could have killed him. Next thing I know, I'm in intensive care where I'm surrounded by nuns. I thought, okay, that's curtains, ICU, nuns, curtains. 4 to 9 days in intensive care depending on the source. But the exact number matters less than what happened afterward. He was discharged, returned to the set, and continued filming the fight scenes with the very man who had punched him into the hospital. The punch that nearly killed him was kept in the final cut. Audiences watched Rocky get beaten by Drago without knowing that the bruise on Rocky's chest was the bruise on Stallone's chest. Lundgren said years later, "I did what he told me. He was the boss." The two remain close friends to this day, a friendship built on the foundation of a punch that nearly killed one of them. But Rocky IV was only the first entry. In 1981, while filming Escape to Victory with Pele, Stallone insisted on standing in goal to block a shot from the greatest player in history. He broke a finger. A small detail, almost humorous compared to what would come later, but it illustrated the pattern that ran through his entire career. Stallone always did everything himself. No stunt doubles. No special effects when flesh and bone would do, never accepting that the camera could be fooled by an angle instead of by a real body. Then came The Expendables in 2010, and the list jumped from a broken finger to a broken neck. In a fight scene with Steve Stone Cold Austin, the 250-pound WWE wrestler. On take 10 or whatever it was, Stallone was body slammed into a stone wall. "I did stupid stuff," he said in The Family Stallone in 2024. "I was directing Expendables and, like an idiot, I'm doing take 10, take whatever, and I remember one slam and I could actually feel one bang." Steve knew. Broken neck, dislocated shoulders on both sides, a metal plate implanted in his neck, spinal fusion surgery, and from that day on everything changed. I never recovered from Expendables. After that film, it was never physically the same. So I warn people, don't do your own stunts. The metal plate in Sylvester Stallone's neck, no one sees it when he wears a vest and walks the red carpet. No one sees it when he smiles for the camera, but it is there every day, every night. Every time he turns his head or bends down to tie his shoes, reminding him that this body has been broken and put back together with bolts instead of by nature. In total, 7 major spinal surgeries by early 2024, with an 8th revealed at the Kennedy Center in December 2025. And here, amid the numbers and medical terms, amid the broken neck and the swollen heart and the blood pressure of 260, is the heaviest detail in this entire story, not the number 8. Not the metal plate, but a sentence spoken by a young girl on television. Scarlett Stallone, the youngest daughter, born in 2002, said in The Family Stallone as her father prepared for his 7th surgery, "My whole childhood, he was in pain. He did everything he could to push through the pain and be present. But I couldn't imagine every waking moment you are just hurting. Throughout my childhood, Dad was always in pain." Jennifer Flavin added in the voice of someone who had grown used to living with fear but had never stopped being afraid. "He doesn't like people to know he's had so many back surgeries. It's very scary for our family every time Sly has to go through surgery because you never know. You never know." Sistine added, "It's really hard to see my father go through yet another painful operation. Yet another one. Again. And this is the sharpest paradox in the entire Sylvester Stallone story. He did not destroy his body through vices, not alcohol, not drugs, not gambling or all-night parties. He destroyed his body through the very virtue that everyone most admired in him. Absolute dedication, the refusal to fake it, the belief that if Rocky got punched, then Stallone had to get punched for real. The very thing that made him great was also what made his daughter say, "Throughout my childhood, Dad was always in pain. There is no one to blame, no vice to point a finger at. Only a man who loved his work so much that he let it crush his body." And 3 daughters who grew up watching their father, hurt every day with nothing to do but sit in hospital waiting rooms and wait. In December 2025, when Stallone walked the red carpet at the Kennedy Center with a gold-plated cane, fans online wrote, "So sad to see Mr. Stallone is using a cane." But look closely at the photo from that night. He did not hide the cane, did not turn away, did not try to stand straighter than his body allowed. He placed the cane in front of him and posed with it, exactly the way Rocky raised his fists at the top of the steps. Not because he had won, but because he was still standing. In January 2026, he posted a gym video to Instagram for his 37.7 million followers, standing in front of a mirror in the room he calls his sanctuary, and said, "Every year it gets harder and harder. But that's why you gotta push harder and harder. Blood, sweat, and tears. Every year it gets harder, but that's why you have to push harder." 8 surgeries, a metal plate in his neck, a gold-plated cane. And he was still standing in front of the mirror working out at nearly 80, because stopping would mean admitting that the body had won, and Sylvester Stallone, the man who wrote Rocky Balboa, never admits that. Fists in the ring and the fists of fate are 2 completely different things. One you can block, the other you cannot. Sylvester Stallone has had 3 marriages, 5 children, and in the roughly 10 years from 2012 to 2022, fate punched his family repeatedly, without warning, without a break between rounds. His first marriage to photographer Sasha Chak began on December 28, 1974, before Rocky existed, when Stallone was still an unknown actor marrying the woman he loved. They had 2 sons, Sage Moonblood, born May 5, 1976, and Sergo, born in 1979. The marriage did not survive the fame. They divorced on February 14, 1985, Valentine's Day. 10 months later, Stallone married Danish actress Brigitte Nielsen. They met and got engaged while filming Rocky IV, and divorced after 19 months amid a tabloid storm. Then came Jennifer Flavin. In 1988, at a restaurant in West Hollywood, 42-year-old Stallone met a 19-year-old girl who was having dinner with friends. They did not leave each other until he left her in the most brutal way. In 1994, Stallone sent a handwritten breakup letter by FedEx, the kind of service people use to send business contracts, because he was involved with supermodel Janice Dickinson and believed he was the father of the child she was carrying. A DNA test after the baby was born in February 1994 proved he was not the father. He ended things with Dickinson, went through a brief engagement with model Angie Everhart in 1995, then returned to Flavin, the woman he had broken up with by FedEx, and she took him back. They married in 1997 at the Dorchester Hotel in London. 3 daughters, Sophia Rose, born August 27, 1996, Sistine Rose on June 27, 1998, Scarlett Rose on May 25, 2002. Then the summer of 2012. On July 13, a housekeeper discovered that Sage Stallone had died at his home on Mulholland Terrace in Studio City, Los Angeles. 36 years old, actor, film producer, co-founder of the film company Grindhouse Releasing. Friends had been unable to reach him for several days beforehand. Drug rumors exploded immediately. The autopsy results released on August 30, 2012. Atherosclerosis leading to a heart attack. Natural causes. Only over-the-counter painkillers in his system. No drugs, no alcohol. A 36-year-old heart that simply stopped. No one caused it, no one could have prevented it. No one could be blamed. Stallone said through TMZ, "When a parent loses a child, there is no greater pain. Sage was our first child and the center of our universe." But behind the statement was a far more complicated relationship. There were reports that Sage had not been allowed into his father's house in his final years, that he had been cut off from Stallone's life. His nephew Ed Felitti publicly wrote on Facebook that Sage had only wanted his father to return a birthday phone call on July 6 and never received one. And there was a detail from 22 years earlier that no one forgot. In 1990 in Rocky V, Sage played Rocky Jr. and later admitted that the line, "You never spent time with me," was genuine, that he did not need to act, because those were the things he truly felt about his father. In 2023, in the documentary Sly, Stallone touched on Sage's death for the first time on camera, and his face showed that this was a wound that even 8 spinal surgeries could not match. Sage died of heart disease, not the consequence of any vice, not karma. There is no lesson to be drawn. Only pure loss, the kind of loss that paradoxically can hurt more than guilt. Because when you cause something, at least you can try to fix it. But when no one is at fault, all you can do is hold the wound and keep walking without knowing where to go. 6 weeks after Sage, August 26, 2012. Toni Ann Felitti, his half-sister on his mother's side, 48 years old, died of lung cancer that had metastasized to the brain, in the arms of their mother, Jackie, in Santa Monica. Jackie Stallone, 90, told the New York Daily News, "I was holding her in my arms. I had just washed her face and told her how pretty she looked, and she just fell asleep. What a terrible month. First Sage and now Toni. At least they're together now in heaven." The history between Stallone and Toni Ann was not simple. In 1987, she threatened to sue him with allegations of physical abuse. Stallone paid $2 million plus $666 a month for life. He denied every accusation. Jackie called it extortion. But when Toni Ann died, Stallone helped her family. Her son Edmund confirmed it. And when Jackie called to deliver the news, Stallone said only one thing: he could not take any more pain. And then there is Sergo, the second son, diagnosed with autism at age 3. He once appeared in Rocky II as an infant, playing Rocky's son, and that was almost the only time the world ever saw him. Sergio has lived entirely outside the spotlight his whole life, while his three half-sisters on his father's side shone on red carpets and co-hosted Miss Golden Globe in 2017. No one talks about Sergio, no one asks. The silence surrounding him is heavier than any tabloid headline. A son whom the most famous father in the world could not protect from something no one caused and no one can cure. Then, August 2022. On the 19th, Jennifer Flavin filed for divorce in Palm Beach, Florida, after 25 years, alleging Stallone had transferred assets out of the marital estate. 9 days earlier, she had posted on Instagram with their 3 daughters. "These girls are my priority. Nothing else matters. The 4 of us forever. 4 people, not 5. Stallone had been cut out of his own family's photograph. A few days later, he was photographed having the portrait tattoo of Jennifer on his arm removed and replaced with the dog Butkus from Rocky. His representative said the old tattoo had been damaged during a touch-up, but the timing told the story without any need for explanation. Stallone told TMZ, "We did not end the relationship on such a trivial argument. We just went in different directions. I have the highest respect for Jennifer. I will always love her." Then the thing no one predicted. Only 1 month later, September 2022, the two of them met again at home, talked and reconciled. No press conference, no grand statement, no televised vow renewal. His representative told Page 6, they decided to meet back up at home, where they talked and were able to work out their differences. They are both extremely happy. 2 people, he 76, she 54, who had been together 25 years, who had survived the summer of 2012 and 8 surgeries and the Razzies and the Oscars and everything in between, sat down in their own house and decided that 25 years was worth saving. There was no spiritual conversion here, no public confession, just 2 human beings choosing to stay together in silence, and sometimes silence says more than any speech. In 2017, amid the Me Too movement, a woman accused Stallone of sexual assault in 1987 and 1990. In October 2018, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office decided not to prosecute. Insufficient evidence, statute of limitations expired. Most men at 80, after 8 spinal surgeries, a metal plate in the neck, and half a century of a body crushed by the very profession that made them, would sit on the balcony of a house in Palm Beach, looking out at the ocean and call it the rest of their life. But Sylvester Stallone is shooting Season 4 of Tulsa King, his first long-running television series, created by Taylor Sheridan, streaming on Paramount+, tells the story of Dwight the General Manfredi, a New York mafia boss exiled to Tulsa, Oklahoma, after 25 years in prison, a man discarded by his organization who refuses to disappear and builds a new empire on ground that might as well be another planet. Stallone said of Dwight in a 2025 interview, "It's been a reprieve from his fate, which was going to be quite brutal and severe." And that sentence, though he was speaking about the character, applies to Stallone himself with an accuracy that is chilling. Tulsa King is a late-life reprieve for a man Hollywood had sentenced to washed up for 15 years, and he answered that sentence by creating the biggest success of his career at an age when most actors have already written their memoirs and accepted Lifetime Achievement Awards. The numbers do not lie. Tulsa King was Paramount+'s most-watched original series globally in 2024. The Season 2 premiere drew more than 21 million views. Season 3 aired from September to November 2025 with Samuel L. Jackson, who was later spun off into his own series Nola King. Season 4 began shooting in late 2025 with Stallone posting behind-the-scenes photos on Instagram. And in June 2026, the writer's room for Season 5 opened, with the possibility of shifting the setting to New York, the city where both Stallone and Dwight Manfredi began. At 80, he is not ending, he is in the middle. Alongside Tulsa King, the Stallone family appears in The Family Stallone on Paramount+, a reality show whose producers describe his role as the greatest role of his life, the role of father. And it is true, in the show Stallone is not Rocky, not Rambo, not Barney Ross or Dwight Manfredi. He is a man mercilessly teased by 3 daughters taller than he is, a man who wishes they would stop growing. A man who is witty and self-deprecating in ways 50 years of action films never allowed him to be on camera. But it is also in this program that he reveals the 7 surgeries, and later the 8th, the chronic pain he hid from the world, the body still paying the price for every real punch and every real body slam he refused to let a stuntman take for him. In January 2025, Stallone stepped into an entirely new role. President Donald Trump appointed him special ambassador to Hollywood, along with Mel Gibson and Jon Voight, a newly created position more symbolic than substantive, yet the very existence of the title speaks to Stallone's stature. He is no longer merely an actor. He is a cultural icon, the kind of icon a president wants standing beside him. In December 2025, the Kennedy Center Honor, a lifetime tribute to artistic achievement, in the same year as Kiss, Gloria Gaynor, Michael Crawford, and George Strait. Jennifer stood beside him on the red carpet. The woman he had once left by FedEx, the woman who had filed for divorce and then returned within a month, now standing there next to him, next to the gold-plated cane, and the photograph from that night contains everything one needs to know about this marriage. It survived not because it was perfect, but because both of them decided it was worth surviving. Then July 2026, the trailer for the documentary I Play Rocky was released, recounting the story of the still unknown Stallone fighting to star in the Rocky screenplay he himself had written. 50 years later, he is still telling the Rocky story, still living inside the character he created on a typewriter in a squalid, rooming house in 1975. The character that saved him, the character that imprisoned him. And at 80, he still cannot or will not distinguish between salvation and imprisonment. On July 6, 2026, Sylvester Stallone turned 80. Global media paid tribute. Still Rocky after all these years, the Jerusalem Post noted his Jewish-Ukrainian roots on his mother's side. Men's Journal ranked him among the greatest action stars of all time, and every article mentioned the same record. Stallone and Harrison Ford are the only two actors in the entire history of cinema to have a film top the box office across 6 consecutive decades, from the 1970s through the 2020s. 6 decades, from Rocky in 1976 to Creed II in 2018 to Tulsa King in the 2020s. There is no third. And at 80, with a body full of metal and scars, he still works out every day, still stands in front of the mirror in the room he calls his sanctuary, and reminds himself that each year it gets harder, which is exactly why he must try harder. And here, near the end of the story, is the question this script deliberately refuses to answer, because answering it would be a lie, and not answering it is the only honesty. Where is the line between extraordinary resilience and an obsession that cannot stop? When does never give up shift from virtue to burden? When do the metal plate in the neck and the 8 scars on the back become evidence that it is time to rest, rather than evidence that he is still standing? And who on this earth, has the right to tell an 80-year-old man that he should stop when he himself wrote the rule book that says stopping is dying, when he himself taught the entire world through Rocky Balboa's mouth that life is measured not by how many times you punch, but by how many times you get punched and keep moving forward? When he himself has lived that line for 50 years, until it is no longer a line of dialogue, but the very spine of his life. Outside the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the bronze statue of Rocky Balboa still stands, solid bronze, fists raised, no pain, no age, unaware that Sage died at 36, unaware that Tony Ann left 6 weeks later, unaware of the 8 surgeries, the metal plate in the neck, the gold-plated cane, the night Jennifer filed for divorce, or the morning she came back. The statue knows nothing, the statue only stands, and every day visitors from all over the world still run up the 72 steps, raise their fists to the sky, take a photo beside the statue, and leave with the feeling that they have touched something immortal. 1,200 kilometers away, on a set in Atlanta, an 80-year-old man sits in a chair, a metal plate in his neck, 8 surgical scars on his back. Beside the chair, a gold-plated cane. The distance between the statue and the man is 50 years, 8 times opening the back and putting it back together. One son whose birthday call he never returned. One son who has lived his entire life in silence, whom he could not protect. One marriage that nearly died and came back to life in 30 days. Thousands of real punches into a real body that he demanded because he believed the audience deserved the truth. The statue is Rocky, the man is Stallone. The world often forgets they are 2 different people, and perhaps Stallone himself forgets, or chooses to forget, because remembering would mean facing the truth that he is human, and humans grow old, suffer, and eventually must stop. But Rocky does not stop. And Stallone, the man who wrote that, lived that, and paid for it with every vertebra for half a century, will not stop either. That is both the most beautiful thing and the thing that makes your heart tighten, in the story of the man who created a legend and was swallowed by the legend. The lights come up, someone calls action, and he stands again. The way he has stood every time for the past 50 years, after the Razzies, after the ICU, after Sage, after every time the world said he was finished. Because stopping would mean admitting that Rocky is only a character, and Sylvester Stallone has spent his entire life proving the opposite. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like, not for the video, but for the boy with the half-paralyzed face from Hell's Kitchen, who proved that standing up is not a skill, but a choice. Thank you for staying until the final minute. See you in the next stories.